I want to welcome you to another session on First Basics of the Gospel, or Bible Basics as we have labeled these sessions. And today we're going to look at the very beginning of Jesus' personal and public ministry. We're going to be in Matthew chapter 4, and we'll begin with verse 18 and read through verse 22, the end of the chapter, and or near the end of the chapter, and we'll explore the concept that is here, and the concept we'll explore is found in one tiny little line of this text. So this is Matthew chapter 4, verses 18 through 22. And I'm reading from the New International Version of the New Testament. It says, as Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew. They were casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. Come, follow me, Jesus said, and I will make you fishers of men. At once they left their nets and followed him. Going on from there, he saw two other brothers, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, and they were in a boat with their father Zebedee preparing their nets. Jesus called them, and immediately they left the boat and their father and followed him. Now, as we launch into this text, I want to call your attention to the two introductory phrases at the beginning of each of these small, short paragraphs. The first one opens with these words, as Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee. And the second paragraph opens with these words, going on from there. Now I wonder if we can possibly realize what we're hearing in those opening phrases. This is an exact echo in action on the part of Jesus of what he's going to later say to them in his Great Commission. The Great Commission opens like this, as you are going, make disciples in all nations. So everything was predicated upon what we are to do as we are going. This is not a command to get up and go in a special way. This is a command to do something special in a normal going. That is, every step we take is to be occupied with that. Well, here Jesus is modeling that. It was as he was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, and then going on from there, that he engaged and initiated these actions that begin his public ministry. Now, I want you to notice the overwhelming statement near the end of this text we've just read. It's a sort of summary statement. It says, Jesus called them. That's at the end of verse 21. Jesus called them. You see, throughout the centuries, this is what Jesus has been doing. He's been marching through the centuries, calling men, calling people to follow him. This call has been continuous. It's been consistent. It was his first call here. It was his final call, as recorded in the Gospel of John, you come and follow me. And it's his call at every point in between. Enlisting, recruiting, inviting, commanding, commandeering men to follow him. Now, that means they had to leave some things. And in this case, these fishermen left their boats, they left their nets, and they left their father. These three things are specifically identified. Now think of the nets a minute. It's interesting to note how Jesus confronted them. He said, I will make you fishers of men. But notice what they were doing with these nets when he came upon them with his call. Luke chapter 5, similar story, says they were cleaning their nets. Verse 21 here says they were mending or correcting their broken nets. And then verse 18 says they were casting their nets. Now, in pursuing the vocation of fishing, these three actions would be very, very crucial in accomplishing what they want to accomplish as they fish. Well, these three actions are also crucial in the life of a fisher of men, because he uses such nets as his character, his testimony, his vocational walk, his circumstance where he is, the field of service where he is ministering. All of these are among his nets. And he is to regularly keep his nets clean. He is to correct any problem in the nets, just like these fishermen were doing. And he is to consistently and continually cast his nets into the waters to bring forth the catch God would give him. So we want to follow this little text. Jesus called them in this study today. Exactly what was the nature of his call? Well, this is a good text to explore it. Now, we're going to explore it in most of the points, the actual call itself under a certain heading. But at the beginning, we're going to see him modeling the call. So let me give you the points. They're very simple points. Each key word begins with the letter P. So I'm going to give you several English P's, and I hope they're sweet peas, palatable to God's use and palatable to your taste as you enlist for God's use. All right, here's the first one. The nature of Christ's call. Jesus calls us first to the greatest perception in the universe. He calls us to see something. He calls us to capture a vision and engage in ministry as the follow-up of what we have seen. Now notice how this is modeled here. Verse 18 says, as Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers. And the next paragraph begins, going on from there, he saw two other brothers. Notice that in each case, when this big verb, he saw, is used, the object of his seeing was people. Do you remember when he encountered Simon Peter in the first recorded face-to-face encounter in the Gospels? It says, when Jesus beheld him. And the word is emblepsos. It literally means to look into. When Jesus looked into him, that's what launched Peter's place in the movement of Christianity. That's what launched Jesus' enlistment of Peter. When he looked into him, he said, you are Simon, the son of Jonas. You shall be called Cephas, or Peter, which is by interpretation a rock or a stone. Let me ask you a question. When you see people, say two people, a small group of people, a great crowd of people, a mass of people, a congregation of people, what do you really see? When you look at them, how do you see? What do you see? What potential is resident in you because of the seeing, and in them because of what you've seen in them? In other words, do you really see people when you see people? Do you see persons? Do you see individuals as persons, or persons as individuals? And how do you see them? And how far do you see when you look at them? And for what purpose do you see them? Jesus, when he looked at people, saw potential followers, potential disciples, potential leaders, potential total world impactors. That's what he saw when he saw people. We must fasten our attention on others as Jesus did. It's interesting that in verse 18, the Amplified Bible translates it like this. While he was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he noticed two brothers. He took note of them. And you may be sure he noticed them from his perspective with a vocation in mind. So how do I see people? Do I simply see them as a great crowd, rejoice in the size of the multitude in church? Do I see them as a football game and never really notice anybody as a crowd at a football game? Do I see performers on the football field and never really notice anybody for eternal reasons or purposes? So Jesus calls us to the greatest perception in the universe. He calls us to see persons the way he sees and the way he saw persons. All right, here's the second point in the nature of Christ's call. He called them, having seen them for what he saw in them, he called them, secondly, to the greatest pursuit in the universe. It says, when he saw these two pairs, this two pairs of brothers, he said to them, follow me. And beginning from that point, if you admit that he stayed with them 24/7 until he went out to accomplish the redeeming events, 24 days, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, which is what the text indicates he did. This means that beginning from this point, he spent 26,000 hours with these people whom he is now calling. What did he call them to? He called them to observe him. He called them to see instinctively, intuitively, perceptively into him. He saw them, he asked them to see what he was doing. And he asked them, in this term, follow me, to move with him as he ministered to them, to other people. You see, the word follow means to pursue. It's an extremely active or aggressive lifestyle if the person you're following is going anywhere. He in effect said, go where I go, watch me, see what I do, and imitate both me and what I do. Enjoy me and engage in what you see me doing. Do what I do. So he's saying, move close to me and imitate me. Now I want you to notice a second call of the same kind. It's in Matthew chapter 9. Jesus is here calling the apostle to be named Matthew. Matthew is sitting at a tax collector's booth. And the whole story leading up to this simply says, as Jesus went on from there, and there it is again, as he's on the move, as he's going, he's simply enlisting men. He saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. He told him, follow me. And Matthew got up and followed him. Now let me give you a third one. This is in the very familiar story of the rich young ruler. Everything has been set up for this statement right here. He said, all these things have I kept from my youth up. What do I still lack? And Jesus answered, if you want to be complete, go sell your possessions. See, that was an idol between him and God, so he had to get rid of that to follow Christ. Sell your possessions and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come and follow me. Now, both of those words, each of those words is a dynamite word. It requires movement. Come, follow. It requires mobility, and it requires momentum, steadiness, steadfastness, consistency, continuation. So he said, come and follow me. You see, his call never varied. At the first, it was follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. Later it was follow me, and then follow me, and then follow me. And his ministry closes before he goes out to the redeeming events with him summoning the Apostle John. Never mind what others do, he says, you follow me. So we're called to the greatest pursuit in the world. Then we're called to the greatest person in the world. That's the nature of his call. He did not simply say, get up and go. He said, come and follow me. Now focus your eyes, the eyes of your heart, on this me. This person who calls himself me. In this text that we've read, Jesus is called he, him, and he calls himself me. He makes himself the crucial, central, critical issue of everything Christian. An Englishman named John Blanchard wrote a marvelous little book about the person of Christ and the ministry of Christ. And the name of the book is, Will the Real Jesus Please Stand Up? Well, the first chapter has a very intriguing title. The chapter title is 1 in 60 billion. Though that's the entire wording of the first chapter of the book, the title of it. Let me state that again. Chapter 1 is named 1 in 60 billion. And here's the premise of chapter 1. If we can trust sociological suggestion and statistics, then there have lived on planet Earth some 60 billion people in all of its history that we know about, including any recorded human history. 60 billion people. But there is one singular, special, supernaturally special, divinely naturally special person out of all these 60 billion. Jesus is the great unlike. Nobody else like him. Jesus is the great unique. Unique among men. There's nobody else like him. He alone is the God-man. He's not man rising up to be God. He's God descending to become a man. He didn't forfeit his godhood when he became man. Nor did he lose any part of his manhood in remaining God. He is as much God as if he had never been man, as much man as if he had never been God. And there's no confusion of the two persons. He is the God-man. Now, that makes him unique out of 60 billion people. And he's the one, oh, did you hear this? He is the one who commandeers us saying, follow me. But what have we typically done? We have actually, unwittingly, subtly, replaced following Jesus in all the dimensions of his going, thinking, speaking, doing. We've replaced it with faithful church going. Well, you can't match that with Jesus. He didn't say, follow me and I'll take you constantly, regularly, and make you a faithful church attendant. Now, he himself went to church customarily, habitually. It says he went to the synagogue as his habit was, but none of his strategy with his men is revealed in the New Testament Gospels to be a strategy of going to church, and especially of just going to church. So what did he do? He took them to identify with himself. Period. So whatever he did, they would do. Whatever he thought, he would express it in his speech, and they would begin to catch it, and they would begin to speak it, and they would begin to think it. They saw what he did within the dimensions of the vocation he assigned to them, and they knew they were to do that by the assignment he gave them. And here's one of them. Follow me, I'll make you fishers of men. That's one of the assignments. So what did he do when he attached a person closely to himself? First, he convinced that person of his own identity, that is, of Christ's own identity. He took the wraps off of who he was as the God-man and showed himself to them so they would be absolutely persuaded about his divine human identity. Then he showed them his integrity. I am totally trustworthy. You can always rely on me. I'm good to my word. When you see me performing and I echo a vocation for you, you can do it just like I do it. By the same dynamic, with the same result. You see what he expects out of us? Wow, is this gigantic. And then he involved them in his strategy. So he convinced them of his identity. He revealed his integrity and persuaded them concerning that. Then he implicated and involved them in his strategy. That's this fishing for men. And in the Great Commission, he summarized all of it and went far beyond mere fishing for men. He went to cleaning and preparing them and putting them to the use the catcher intended when he caught them through these assigned agents. And he made himself the issue. He is the person. So this is a call to the greatest person in the universe. Now, number 3. This is a call. The call of Christ is a call to the greatest process in the universe. Don't miss these carefully crafted words. Follow me, and I will make you. Now, we can lop that off right there. We can leave out the rest of the sentence and really not lose anything. Because knowing what we know about Jesus, he's going to take those men far beyond merely what we think when we think of fishing for men. He's going to take them far beyond that. He's going to take them on a world engagement, engaging all the cultures and civilizations and societies and people of the earth. It's that big. So he says, follow me and I will make you. You see, you, the moment you rise to follow him, will be the object of his building project. This is a construction word. Follow me and I'll construct you. Follow me and I will build you into what I intend you to be. This means that Jesus wants to make you over into something you were not when you first met him. And he wants to make you over today in something you weren't yesterday. And tomorrow the same. He wants to enlarge the vocation he is beginning to build into you. And since many of you don't even know what it is, you're saved and happily in church, that's not what this vocation is about. Of course those are parts of it. And of course they're vital. But if they stop there, they are total betrayals of the Son of God, because look at his ministry. It didn't engage in those things as the habitual factors of his life and that alone. His was a field ministry. Why, right here it says, as he was walking. And going on from there, it was an on the job, on the move, on the go, mobile training, reaching, recruiting, and training, discipling, and turning into disciple makers of any potential person he met. And this is to be echoed in us. He will make us into what he was. But listen, here's a principle. He cannot make you over as he desires unless he can first take you over in a total commandeering of your life under his lordship. Paul in 1 Corinthians 3:9 said, you are God's building. In other words, he's the construction engineer. You are the bricks and the mortar. He has the blueprint, and he's bound, he's bent on constructing you according to his purpose. So again, this is massive. So we have been called to the greatest perception in the universe, the greatest pursuit in the universe. We're to see like Jesus saw and sees. We're to follow him. We're called to the greatest person in the universe. Me, he called himself. And we're called to the greatest process in the universe. And I will make you. Now, finally, we're called to the greatest purpose and product in the universe. He didn't simply say, I will haphazardly construct you. He said, I will make you fishers of men. And he constantly talked about our bearing fruit. So he mixed two metaphors in those two factors alone. Why does he call it fruit, the product of what he wants to do with us? Because fruit is born, is produced to feed somebody else. So I want to make your life food for somebody else. Not only that, every piece of fruit has in it 1,000 seeds for production of more of the same kind. Every Christian is bound and responsible by Christ for reproduction and multiplication of other persons following Christ as well. Now, pause to tell yourself and admit that most of the Christian community is doing nothing about this. Those people who would think of themselves as good Christians because they're in church every Sunday, where is their downline of multiplying disciples? See, that's what Jesus means here. And he actually stated it in a walloping command in the Great Commission when he said, as you are going, anywhere and everywhere you are going, turn people into disciples. Now, a true disciple of Christ will always be a disciple maker. He can't be a disciple without being a discipler. And if he makes disciples, he reproduces the Christ in him in somebody else, close up, hands-on, over an extended period of time, and then he leads them to be a reproducer as he has become with them. And so he leads them to reproduce and multiply. So the army is enlarging at my fingertips all the time. He said, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. Now let's pursue that analogy for a few closing moments. In Luke chapter 5, the opening verses, there is a fantastic story of Jesus enlisting his disciples, giving them this call again to fish for men. But I want you to listen to the key line of that story. It's varying in its statement from this story. Here's what he said. He talks about them coming, following him, them pursuing him, his vocation, his purpose, his process. And then he says, hereafter, this is Luke 5 verse 10, hereafter you shall catch men alive. Now there's a difference between mere fishing and mere catching and catching. There's a vast difference between only fishing and catching the fish you're fishing for. One man had a wife who loved to window shop. She was very savings-minded, so she didn't spend a great deal of money on clothes or items. But she loved to window shop. And one day he rather humorously said to her, why do you call it shopping when you never buy anything? And she retorted, why do you call it fishing when you never catch anything? Well, if you think you're fishing and you never catch, you're not fishing. Because he said, listen, hereafter you shall not merely fish, but catch men alive. See, when you catch a fish, you bring him from life to death. When you catch a fish, you bring him from life to death. But when you catch a man for Christ, you bring him from death to life. You have to deceive a fish to catch it. But you fully inform and enlighten a man about Christ and the gospel to properly catch him. Now, take the analogy a few steps further. Let's make this admission. This whole wide world, made up of the populace of the world's people, is like the sea. It's like the ocean. The ocean is vast, big, threatening, potentially violent, potentially stormy, and turbulent. Here's a second principle. The world is full of men, just like the fish is full of sea. The sea is full of fish. And those men are market spiritually, just like fish are a fisherman's market in the sea. Principle number 3. The fish in the sea resist removal from their natural habitat, their natural environment, their natural element. They are at home in the water, and they resist being taken out of the water. Lost men resist being removed from the world. That's the element they've always known. That's the reason it requires a happy miracle from God to transform them, where they will no longer love the world. They are taken out of it, and a part of their redemption is their redemption from the world, so that they cannot conform to its cultural or philosophical patterns of life any longer. They now have a far higher calling. So we're not merely to be followers, we're to be fishers. But according to what Jesus said, if we are not fishing, we are not following. Because he said, follow me and I will make you fishers of men. This is not a simple offer to us. This is a guarantee. In Luke 5, he said, hereafter you shall catch. Notice, you shall. There's no debate about this. You shall catch men alive. So if I'm not following, I'm not fishing. Two fishermen were out fishing. One had come in from fishing, and he brought a whole stacked up boatload of fish. And a man met him at the dock and said, I've been watching you for several days. Every day you come in with a load of fish like this. How do you do that? And the man said, well, I can demonstrate it to you. Why don't you join me tomorrow morning here at this dock, and we'll go out. I'll show you how to do it. And so they went out early the next morning, got up into a real far distant edge of the lake, and went up into an inlet or a cove, and he anchored the boat. Then the man who was fishing reached under the seat of the boat, took out a stick of dynamite, lit it, and cast it out into the water, and there was a whoosh and a boom, and the water came up in a volume, and the fish came up with it, and then the fish splatted back into the water dead, and they floated around the top of the water around the place of the explosion. He just moved the boat over there and started scooping up into his boat. After he'd gotten that pile, he did it again and again. After several of them, the boat was getting full. So he turned on the motor. They started back to the boathouse. About halfway back, the man said, you know that's illegal, don't you? The fisherman said, what difference does that make? That doesn't make any difference to me. And the man pulled back his jacket and exposed a game warden's badge. And he said, well, it makes a great deal of difference to me. You see, I'm a game warden. You know what the fisherman did? He smiled wryly, reached down under the seat, pulled out another stick of dynamite, lit a match, and ignited that dynamite, and tossed it down to the other end of the boat and said, sir, are you going to talk or fish? Well, this question confronts me today. I'm talking about it. Am I going to merely talk or fish? We occasionally talk about it. Our pastors occasionally talk about it. Teachers talk about it. Christians may talk about it. But the issue is, as we are going, or as we go from here, are we going to merely talk, or are we going to fish? If we follow him and fish as he tells us and leads us to the primed fish to be caught, we will catch men alive. So are we going to talk or fish? Would you pray with me just a moment? Lord, I ask you to register these truths deeply in my character again today. Carve them on my spirit so that when I think about this. When I speak about this. When I act about this. Make me alert to the next person I meet who may not know Christ. And give me awareness and wisdom and capability about how best to relate to that person to influence him to come to Christ. Make me a fisher of men. Do this for every person who will see this study from this point on till time ends for us. I trust you for this and pray it in Jesus' name. Amen.